iPhone guest, is that you, Caitlin?
Yes.
And if it's convenient, are you able to turn your phone this way just so it's uniform?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. Give me one moment, Ryan. Okay, guys, we are live on YouTube, broadcasting and recording, ready to call to order when y'all are.
Call the meeting to order at 12:04 on April the 15th, 2021. First order of business is public comment. Is there any public comment?
There was none submitted via email, so we have nothing to announce.
We'll move on to the consent agenda. Consider approving the January 21st, 2021 Animal Shelter Advisory Committee regular meeting minutes. Has everybody had a chance to review those?
Yes.
And do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
And a second? All right, a motion is second. All in favor, say aye with your raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposing? All right, they carry. How many? There's 5 of them. 6.
6.
Yeah, 6-0. Moving on to the next item is the regular agenda. We'll first start off with a election of chair and co-chair for the term ending in January 2022.
I do have just a brief presentation to let everyone know what opportunities are available. We have, it is required by city ordinance that we elect a chair and a vice chair. This is a 1-year term ending in January 2022. Just for quick reference, these are all of the committee members available to serve in those roles, should anyone to nominate or self-nominate.
All right. Do we have any nominations?
I guess what all does that entail? I did not have a chance to look at that portion.
I mean, basically, the chairman runs the meeting. I mean, there's not a whole lot more other than, whatever Morgan may need, responding to her emails or cries for help. So, is there anything else, Morgan?
That's about it. Just having a general working knowledge of running a business meeting. It doesn't have to be any adopted format for running the meeting. I think we use just, modified rules for calling the meeting to order, entertaining motions, just a general working knowledge of that.
And we're looking for both a chair and a vice chair?
Yeah, if y'all are comfortable, that would be easiest if the motion included the nomination for chair and vice chair together in one action item.
Okay. I will self-nominate myself for vice chairperson.
And I'll run for chairman again. So,
is that a motion, Ryan?
Yes. Anybody else interested? Okay, somebody want to make it official?
I'm looking for a second. I guess we would take Caitlin as second since she also self-nominated. Is that okay with you, Caitlin?
Yes, if I can, I'll second it if I'm allowed to do that.
Absolutely.
All right. All those in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Well, then I guess I'll be chair for another year and Caitlin will be vice chair.
Thank you.
All right. We'll move on to B, discussion and possible action related to monthly shelter numbers for January 2021. Ms. Morgan?
Yes, we have some really great news for y'all. This meeting, we have 3 monthly reports to share with you and some really nice items in each one. For the month of January, our intake was 221 new animals arriving on the premises. That was about 30 fewer animals than the month before. That does look low. It is our slow season through about November to February, where our intake is lower so we can get caught up on other projects. There were 69 adoptions, 104 transfers out to rescue groups. Anytime that's over 100, it's noteworthy, and we're grateful for that. And that was the first time this fiscal year that it was over 100. Then 102 animals redeemed by their owner. 23 either died in custody or were euthanized. And that left us with 334 animals left in the shelter. This month, we did have more outcomes than intake, which means we did have an overall decrease in the number of animals we're housing. And so that left us with a 92.28% live release rate. Of the animals that died, 11 were cats, 10 were dogs, so a pretty even split there. 2 were other, and that was 2 different instances of turkeys who were injured that we responded to in the field. And another way to break down those animals that were deceased were that 15 of them were sick or injured, 8 were either aggressive or coming out of bite quarantine without an owner redemption. And so we always like to break down our outcomes by type, how we're doing on the whole. Anytime that our deceased is under 10% means that we're doing really well. Adoptions made up 22% of our total outcomes. Return to owner were almost half at 45%, and transfers out increased to 25% there for January.
Any questions or comments about our January numbers? All right, we'll move on to February 2021.
So February was a chaotic month for everyone, right? We were facing a winter storm Uri and still trying to care for all the animals on the premises. Intake did increase from 220 to 273 for February. That's important to note since we were actually closed to the public for about a week due to the inclement weather. And so even though intake is still under 300, we did have very hectic days before and after the storm with a large volume of intake on those days that we were open. Adoptions comprise 55% of our outcomes. Transfers out were 164 animals. That's particularly noteworthy. That is a very high number for our experience. That is largely driven by our rescue partners still stepping up and taking transports, in addition to American Pets Alive coming forward and saying they wanted to support shelters impacted by Winter Storm Uri, and they took a large number of dogs and cats off the premises and sent them to reputable rescues. The transports that we did in February for Pets Alive actually went to Boston, Mass. And so our dogs and cats are doing really well in their facility. And that was just on top of our normal activity that, of course, Concho Valley Paws oversees. Then we had 114 animals redeemed by their owner. That does include shelter, neuter, release, and wildlife, of course. And one thing that I really like to brag about for February 2021 is it's the first time we ever had a single digit of numbers that lost their life at our facility. Only 7 animals were deceased, either euthanized or died on the premises. And so that left us with 256 animals left in the shelter. And your animal services had the highest ever live release in our history at almost 98% of our animals released alive. Another way to break down, we do take very seriously that we did have 7 animals lose their life. So we did want to report back on that information. Again, about an even split between cats and dogs, 1 skunk and 1 bird. I do want to point out one error in the published background. Of the animals that were deceased, 5 were sick, injured, and 2 were due to aggression. And so that third bullet point there should actually report 2. So I apologize for that error. So you'll show that the outcomes by type, 20% were local adoptions, 42% returned to owner, and you see that transferred out number increased to 30%.
Well, congratulations on the high live release rate numbers. It's very commendable.
Yes,
Impressive.
and I think the number of deceased, how low it's gotten, that's really awesome too.
Excellent. All right, anybody have any questions or comments about those numbers? Okay, well, we'll move on to March.
So March, we are back in the swing of things. So over 300 in new arrivals. Our slow season is officially over. We had 359 animals arrive in the month of March. Adoptions were also up with 72 animals adopted and 124 animals were transferred to rescue. I do want to point out that effective March 1st, we had talked a while back, and I know we'll talk later in the agenda about our funding for the shelter neuter release of community cats, and that we did not have any funding any longer to continue that program. Effective March 1st, Concho Valley Paws staff has been pulling our community cats, and so you'll see a difference in the reporting there, that cats are no longer reported under redeemed by owner, but they are reported under transfer to Concho Valley Paws as they oversee the pulling of those community cats to be released alive to the field. So we had 136 animals redeemed by owner, which does include wildlife. 19 animals were deceased. And so you can see there that we had about even new arrivals versus outcomes. So the animals left in the shelter was about even to last month at 277, still performing really well with almost 95% of our animals released alive. Of those animals that lost their life, 13 were cats. We saw, and you'll see only 4 were dogs. 1 was a bat and 1 was a skunk. We had a large number of cats in March lose their life due to they were feral cats, truly wild cats that were injured. And so they had either been hit by a car or attacked by an animal that we were unable to offer support and assistance for care because they were wild and able to go through a treatment protocol. So the thing that I want y'all to brag about for March is that of the 19 animals that died, 0 of them were due to aggression. We did not euthanize 1 animal due to aggression. Every animal that lost its life was because it was sick and injured beyond treatment. So that's remarkable for the month of March. That's the first time we've ever had that performance. And then you'll see the outcomes by type, the changes there, that adoptions were pretty static at 20% of outcomes. Return to owner was 41%. Transfers out were 31%. And those animals which were deceased comprised 7% of our outcomes for March.
Anybody have any questions about those numbers?
I do not.
All right, we will move on to consider approval of policy limiting community cat intake.
We'd considered bringing this to y'all at our February meeting, which of course had to be canceled due to inclement weather. And so we wanted the opportunity to discuss it with the committee and get some feedback on how you'd like to proceed. Of course, American Pets Alive recommends shelter neuter return. So those community cats that are coming into the facility, that we spay neuter them and return them to their area of origin where appropriate. We had robust cat programming through fiscal years 19 and 20, but it became no longer funded in 2021 as we were fund, of course, was in dire fiscal straits due to the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. I had funded it in those years 19 and 20 with some salary savings. That, of course, is also frozen right now due to the pandemic. And so I came to you all in October 2020 about amending our return to field processes for community cats. And we set forth some parameters where if we had sufficient funds, of course, all cats would be spay neutered and vaccinated. But to the extent that we don't have sufficient funds, if we were at moderate, middle, or just insufficient, there are certain cats that would not be spayed or neutered. We are at moderate level right now. I have about $3,000 that's left over that would place us at that moderate level. Unfortunately, that portion of the policy recommends returning male cats unaltered. And so that's something that we have been experiencing for the months October through February. And then, of course, as I mentioned, come March 1st, Contra Valley Paws has been pulling all of our male and female cats for spay neuter. So they're all leaving altered under their umbrella. So that is a really great program and opportunity that we're definitely taking advantage of. We know that that is limited to PAWS resources as well. It's also related to our cat intake. So when I made this policy for the period October through February, our cat intake did exceed space and resources. We didn't have the funds to spay neuter those animals, and we were really concerned with those community cats going through, number one, they were trapped in a vehicle trip across town, brought into the shelter for several days waiting for their rabies vaccine, put back in a vehicle to return to their place of origin. So that created a lot of stress in the animal, but it also created ill will with the trappers and neighborhood that they were originating from, that we were bringing back this cat. And usually if someone does complain, hey, I trapped this cat and brought it to you, I can say, well, now they're spay neutered, so they can't reproduce. So, over time, your cat population will decrease. And during these few months that we had this, I couldn't even promise that. And so that we definitely don't want to create ill will with trappers, but we also don't want to put those cats through that stress. And so we were considering just refusing those cats outright and saying we would just limit our intake on cats related to sick, injured, neonatal, domestic owned cat, certainly not a community cat, a cat that's dependent on a human food source and used to being inside, or cats coming in for rabies quarantine. So we were considering limiting our intake to that when PAWS was able to step forward and take on the pulling of these community cats. So we've continued intake on cats uninterrupted, and to the extent that we have this partnership and availability of the partnership with Contra Valley Paws, but depending on their availability to continue spay neutering, I'm open to tabling this, taking any action on this. I just still wanted it to come before the committee because the city's position hasn't changed. We're at that moderate level of funding. And one reason why I believe that Contra Valley Paws has been able to keep up with spaying and neutering all of our community cats is because our cat intake is down. We did have some training this week from our representative at American Pets Alive. She came and spent a lot of time with us related to a disease outbreak in the community and other issues we were facing to become 90%. And one of the things I shared with her was that cat intake year to date for our fiscal year for 6 months into the year, we've taken in about 450 cats. And that, of course, includes all cats, community cats, domestic cats. And that's about half compared to fiscal year 19, where we had taken in about 920 cats for the same time period. So I think a lot of the reason we're able to serve these animals appropriately, keep their stay in the shelter really short, get them the medical of a rabies vaccine, a feline annual vaccine, spay and neuter, and return to their area is because our intake is down. In the event that our intake, and so I asked American Pets Alive, is this something you're seeing across the state of Texas? Our intake is down so much compared to prior years. And she said, I really think it's everything, right? It's our big investment in 2019 and 20 in spay neutering cats coming into the shelter. It's also a harsh winter. Perhaps we're going to have a leaner kitten season, although we do have a number of kittens in residence. And it could also be that it's harder to own or surrender a cat at this point. We do ask citizens to be responsible with their cat and go through certain steps if they're considering rehoming their cat. And that was really in its infancy in 2019. And so she said, I really think it's everything working together. And so I just can't predict, is our cat intake going to stay low for fiscal year 21 and potentially beyond? Or are we going to start seeing those numbers late because we've had that harsh winter? Perhaps kitten season is delayed a bit. So as I mentioned, it's certainly for the committee's consideration to us and dialogue and say, is this something we would like to take action on? And so I believe it's worded in such a way where if we don't have sufficient resources, he doesn't have funding to spay neuter, or if our partnership with Contra Valley Paws, they step forward and say, I can't keep up with your volume. If we were at risk of that, then we would just start refusing community cats as a whole. We would tell trappers, don't bring us cats because we have no services to offer them. It's not worth it to bring them into a shelter environment. So we can certainly have committee dialogue about what y'all are comfortable with and potentially tabling it or taking action today. It's all up to y'all how you want to proceed.
My only question, or I guess one of my questions would be how, I know you said trying to make sure that we don't have a negative relationship with trappers. So in the event that that happens, how do you think that the trappers are going to respond to that? Or, and I know we can't predict people's behavior, but what do you see them doing as an alternative?
I think that the communication with folks is imperative. I think that giving a long lead time. So for example, if the committee were to take action on this today or another at a future meeting, we would certainly give the trappers due notice that this is something that is coming. We definitely don't want them to trap a cat, bring it across town, load it in their vehicle, and then be refused at the door. So we would want to have that communication with trappers, give them a long lead time that it's coming, several weeks to notify them that, hey, effective this date, we don't have the resources to care for these, provide any medical for these cats any longer. Please refrain from trapping until we can consider future resources.
Any other questions? Anyone have any suggestions on moving forward with this issue right now?
I'm personally okay with tabling it for later, but if others feel like we need to, make a decision on it now, that's perfectly fine.
So right now where we are is we're telling folks that we don't have the money, basically not
Right.
taking in any cats.
No, right. That's what's for consideration if you'd like to take action on today or table. Right now, we are taking in cats wide open for cat intake. And then Contra Valley Paws is pulling them, spay neutering them, and returning to field. So right now we're providing all services to cats, but it's entirely on our Contra Valley Paws partnership and their resources to do that, as the city funding is insufficient to provide those resources.
So you as the shelter director, do you think that that is the way that we're moving right now, that is affecting our relationship with Paws? Are we draining their bank accounts or making them unhappy or challenging them beyond comfortability?
Jen Murphy with Pause is on the line. I think that they're happy to do it. They believe strongly that cats should be returned to field only after spay neuter. And so I don't want to speak for them, but I'm under the impression that they're happy to do it as long as they have resources to do it. We are meeting again. I'm sorry. I don't know if Jen wants to.
We are completely happy to do it as long as we can keep up with it. I mean, we fit them in where we can, and we'll continue to do so for as long as we can.
Well, I mean, I think if Pause is happy with the way things are going and they can afford to do it and they want to do it, then let them do it. Let them continue to do it.
I think that's fair. And we are scheduled to meet again in June. And
New
so
text message from Sister Bear.
we do have, we can quickly respond to this because we do have a meeting scheduled in June, another one later in the year. So if we do find that we start to really struggle to meet the needs of cats due to the volume of cats, we are meeting frequently enough in 2021 that we can be agile and change this policy at a future date. And then perhaps y'all have this, since we did have this discussion and y'all can spend more time thinking about it or coming up with future questions, I'm happy to consider this table to a future meeting.
Yeah, I think so. I think that would be fine. Can we, are we allowed to put it back in your lap so that if something comes up in the process before we have another meeting, if Concho Valley Paws sees that they're out of money or it's just too big of a challenge, can we put it back in your lap to be able to make the decision to halt the program till further notice?
I think we can maybe assign it to Pause and I to place on a future agenda if we find that we're needing that attention from the board again. I don't think it's necessary to just automatically add it to the June agenda because perhaps this harsh winter will, yield a really lean year for cat intake. And if so, right, we don't want to waste the committee's time on just automatically, having the same discussion again in a couple months. So I think that is, that's fair, that let's just let Pause and I dialogue in the future about when they're ready to cry uncle, if ever, and then we'll bring it back to the board for action at that time, if that's amenable to everybody.
Okay. That would be my motion, is to basically let things ride the way they're riding. And if at any time Pause feels that it's challenging them or pulling their purse strings too hard or whatever, then they just need to let you know and we will handle it when it comes up.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Motion carries. Do we have anything else that anybody needs to discuss?
I do want to caution folks that we are seeing a parvovirus outbreak in the community. And we just want to encourage anybody watching and anybody who has dogs in their home to ensure your pets are current on their parvo vaccine and all puppies are getting their boosters because we are leaning on a lot of resources right now, and so is Concho Valley Paws to save the number of puppies coming in with parvo right now. We've had 53 puppies come in 28 days. About half have been successfully treated for parvovirus.
Oh. All right. Let's go to a follow-up and administrative. Any issues under that? our great and mighty leader.
I'm good. Thank y'all.
Anyone have anything else? Then I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
I'll motion to adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you,
Aye.
everybody. Appreciate your time.